Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. I'm Greg Gross, and Mike Russell is here with us today. And we're going to start out by talking about some recovery work that you can do using Curvemeister to help restore color and fidelity to some very badly damaged images. My personal interest in this comes from having to recover some family slides. And these aren't my pictures in particular. These are just images I found off the web. But one of the troubling things that I've tried to tackle was some of these red burn type images. I had quite a few of them. And each one of them was tackled individually when I did it because, well, hadn't really thought it through. And I've taken a while to think about this, and I've got a couple of saved curve files that I'm going to apply to these to get us into the ballpark quickly so we can work on these images in a more normal color. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open this image in Curvemeister, and I'm going to use the load feature. Now I've stored two curves in my color balance folder. When you go into Curvemeister, there's a library of various pins that Mike already provides for you, and there's a color balance, there's overexposed, and if you go in here there's multiple overexposed, there's underexposed, there's the pin library, and unfortunately it's looking for ACV files and so it doesn't see the pins, but there's also a color balance library, and what you're seeing is a curve that attempts to change daylight into incandescent. So if you had say you shot an image on tungsten film in daylight, you'd need a curve to correct that back. What I've done, and there's some other ones here, by the way, there's incandescent to daylight, there's negative to positive, and negative to positive for Kodak Gold. These get you close, but they're not perfect by any means. What I've done is I've created two different what I call red burn, because what I'm finding is it kind of comes in two flavors, and there may be more. These are the most common that I'm seeing, and I'll show you this on multiple images so you can see why there's two versions of it. The first version is the most aggressive, and I'm going to apply it to this image just to see what happens.
Wow!
And as you can see, it really makes a big difference in a hurry. So I'm going to apply that. Now, at this point, I have two choices. I can continue to manipulate these curves, or I can accept this change and come back in. And I think that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm just going to apply that change. That gets me close. This is an image I could work on anytime. I don't have to do anything special other than go back in into RGB. And I'm going to just finish this up by adding a neutral point up in here. I'm going to choose the shadow on that apparent white tower. And I'm going to fish this around a little bit. And I'm going to try for a shadow point down here just to make sure. The shadows are very blue. So let's see if we can fix some of that. Take that down a little bit, and I'm going to bring some red back into the shadows because I don't think there's zero. And the rest of it is a straight up Photoshop repair. Just repairing these damaged pieces here. I'm gonna go ahead and apply this. Are you guys caught up to this?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and apply this.
That was pretty quick.
Yeah, and that's because those existing ACV files are pretty handy at handling it. I can grab a clone brush here and just clone those spots out. And I got one nasty little teeny tiny spot in here that I'm going to clone out. just to make it look a little prettier. And that's about as far as you would want to take that. But considering where we started, that's a fairly decent correction. This one is far worse than the previous one. And so let's try that very aggressive correction first and see where we get.
Were these prints that you scanned, or were slides, or what?
These are just images I picked off the internet, lol.
Okay.
The problem I have with my pictures is multifaceted. First of all, I don't have any Redburn slides saved. I corrected them all, and I saved them out. I got rid of the originals, and I really didn't think too much of it until I ran across a few more, and then I said, I really should create a curve to do this. Let's take a look at the other one. See, the other one's not aggressive enough, so that's a more aggressive curve. And again, this is one that I probably am going to apply at this point and then come back in. I'm not going to make a layer. I'm just going to do this really quick. Come back into Curvemeister. Now, one of the interesting things that I found with this particular image is that after I get it corrected, it tends to want its own new neutral. And the problem with it is it turns everything blue, as you can see. So what I ended up doing with this image is taking it into CMYK, because I can use the black channel to darken that stuff down, apply that, and then come back into Curvemeister. And there's various different ways you can do this.
Yeah, that's really nice.
But I found that when I did it this way, I got much better results out of it. And again, that's close, but you can always take this even further. Let's see. The next one has a very light burn. So we have I've created, and I'll post these files out to the Curvemeister site. A number 2, and I'm not completely pleased with how this one handles it. It tends to be a little too blue, and I'm still playing around with it a little bit. But once you've applied the curve, you can tweak individual channels just as any other time. It's just a starting point to get you close. Let me try setting a neutral in here. Yeah, it doesn't like this particular slide for some reason. Well, there's a minor failure. It's closer than it was. If you look at the compare, that's where we started. That's bringing it back from the brink a little bit. And this is another interesting one. I'm going to bring this one in and apply. Let's start with the hard one. And that's too much. Wow. So that's a very handy little curve, as you can see. Any questions there?
No, that's good. So it gets you in the ballpark anyway.
Well, it gets you back from what looks like a very bad position very quickly. And from here, I can go back in and I can do a more complete correction. If I wanted to do a by the numbers correction here, I could probably find someplace on this tree to set a neutral or set a neutral point. I'm looking for a highlight. Probably up in there. Let me zoom that out. And let's find us a shadow point. So down in there. And the shadows are very red. So I'll just dial some of that red out. There we go. And the blue midtones look... No, it's the red, actually. Sorry. There we go. And the highlights on the blue. The blue channel took a beating here, I think.
Would you substitute that blue channel?
I could, but at this stage of the game, It's not too noisy.
Mm.
I'm kind of looking at it as a restore, so I'm going to try and keep as much information as I got. I certainly could. I could back out of here and go after it from the channels. Let's try that just to see what happens. If I look at the
Yeah,
channels, ew. Wow. Well, I can use the green channel, and I can go into Curvemeister here, and we can build some contrast. And I'm just going to do this quickly. And then I can substitute that back in. I'll fix the red channel a little bit here too, real quick. Sorry if this looks like greased lightning to you guys. Just bring it in until the shadows start to show up. Is it pop? Yeah.
no.
Okay, I'm gonna replace the blue channel as Lowell had suggested. So I'm gonna go in here and say apply image, and I'm gonna take the background copy of the green channel and just apply it, and then and bring it back in as a luminosity layer. Yep, a little bit. It's a little bit of a modified PPW because I'm going to use curves instead of gamma. I could go in and do a shadow highlight and really open it up. I think that's a little too aggressive. And in combination with what we've already done, it doesn't really hurt it either, because I can always tone it back down later. Now if I go do a by the numbers color correction on it, yeah, the histograms look better too. We've spread the tonality out a lot more. The histograms, I know. I use them, Mike, more to tell me how much, not
I'm just
where.
kidding, yeah.
They just help me define some areas to look at, especially the shadow and highlight sides of the curves. I don't necessarily make any hard decisions on them, but they certainly do point to problem areas. At this point,
so would you say we're seeing some blue clipping then?
Doesn't look like it. It might be. Let me open the blue channel up here. It looks like it's all within the histogram.
That sharp edge coming down says to
somewhere
me
in, well,
it's
considering it's a slide recovery. Who knows? Yeah, same. Well, this is a little bit better. On the shadow end, I want to take this down to about here, and in green, there's certainly damage to this image from time and over manipulation by Photoshop newbies like me, and I think I'm going to bring the middle of the red down a little bit here.
That's a dramatic
further up. And we'll just bring that down to there. And we can apply that. So that's for color. And then we can go in, just like we've been doing over the last couple of sessions, we can go in under LAB and we can introduce some color contrast. I'm going to bring up the B channel here, and we're just going to, now I'm going to set what I've been, I don't know, Mike, I need a term for this. Ruby Slippers didn't make it. Because this is the point that gets you back home in this process. This is the area I don't want the tonality to change in. So I'm just going to set a hue clock here to give me a visual reference, and I'm going to go back and manually construct this contrast pin. And then I'm going to change that contrast and bring that down.
Oh, sweet.
So this would be the pivot point to you, but I'm not really setting a point there. It's more of a logical reference.
Yeah.
I don't know. I got to think of a good. I need a good name. People suggestions are always welcome, and I'm going to flatten these out just a little bit, just so that I don't introduce too much into the image. Switch to the other channel here, and I'm going to reset this because the curve points that I created using the control key end up on both channels, so I need to get rid of them before I go on. And I'm looking for something red, and I don't really see. Well, let's try that. I'm going to just do that as a contrast pin. This may be one we throw away when we're done here. And it starts to introduce halos and things. I'm not sure that. Let's bring that back up to 8. I'm not sure I like what the red has done. So I'm gonna reset this, and I'm just gonna leave it alone. I think that's as far as I would take that, considering the original correction. Let me bring the original image back in here. There's the original. Hello.
Oh, it may not let you open it. If you go to history.
Oh, there you go. That's a good idea. There's where we started.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we took it.
Yeah.
That's a whole new.
It is, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly a dramatic recovery, and it's not that hard to do, especially if you can start with those ACV files. So I'll post those out there. I think there's more work that can be done on them, but they get you in the ballpark. They get you to a place where you feel more confident working on the image. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. Excuse me. So you could do something similar with that, like for photos that you see a lot of them, or some of them that are too blue or too orange or whatever. You make those ACV files and go this way.
This red burn is pretty common.
Yeah.
You see it a lot, especially in faded Kodacolor prints, but you can also see it in Kodachrome slides that have been poorly stored, and Ektachrome tends to turn real purple. And I haven't had to deal with a lot of Ektachromes yet, but I certainly see this red magenta bleed in Kodacolor prints, especially prints from the mid to late 60s and 70s. There's a lot of that. I think the dyes weren't very stable in the paper when they did that, and some of the chemistry probably didn't get as thoroughly washed out of it as it could have, and they turn red. Mm-hmm. And people scan them in and then try and repair them, and they struggle with getting rid of that red color.
Mm-hmm.
So there's my swing at it. Mike, would you like to take over as presenter?
This is Lowell's picture from what they call Ground Zero Paris.
Right.
And it's one of the more wonderful spots in the world. I'd love to be there right now.
It's a fun place.
This looks great as is. What can we fix here? And being an engineer, of course, it's not good enough that it's not broken. You got to fix it anyway. So my first thoughts here are that this foliage is a little bit on the dark side. It's in the shadow compared to the partial sunlight. This was probably taken, I'm guessing, in the either early morning or late evening.
Late evening.
Okay, good. It's a good time to be in Paris. Things are starting to happen. And let's go into Curvemeister and take a look at this puppy. Okay. Okay. And I'm going to do a little bit of zooming, just and take a look. I really like this. Normally I would go after an orange glow like this, like a madman. The reason being, I like to get a good neutral set up, but this is just too excellent. I mean, this just captures beautifully the look of the on the stone of the sunlight, and I really think we need to keep that. So what I'm going to do from last week, the color of slate on the roofs, and this may actually be a lead roof. Lead is also an excellent neutral. It'll turn a little white on you, but it generally does not take on a color cast unless there's lichens growing on it and so forth, which is not the case for this particular guy. So as we move the sample point along, you can see we're blue cyan, which is a typical sky color. And then you move into the sunlit area of the brick, and we're into orange.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'd like to do is even warm up this blue cyan slightly, although that's not really necessary for this picture. But and also there's a concrete wall. Let's move the image up slightly. This is the wall over the river, and it's slightly orange. It goes slightly blue, and then down here it's orange again. So we basically have really nice warm colors everywhere, and I'm going to just show you what this would look like if we dialed it back. Let's pop a neutral onto the concrete, and that's not too bad actually. And if we pop a neutral onto the roof, here's what the image would look like. And I sort of like this look. I don't know about you guys, but let's delete the neutral. You can see the whole image is just slightly colder. So I'm going to go with this neutral on the roof just because I really like this warm glow anyway. And the neutral in this case is going to help us get that. So we're using a combination of Dan Margulis's method, which is by the numbers, and also just the combination of look at it, see if you like it method. And hopefully,
that's so scientific.
And this is off. Yeah, well, in Dan's books a lot, he says things like, "Well, look, we fixed this color, and suddenly these other colors come out and look nice." And I hope I'm at least paying some homage to Dan by using this method. Although I guess okay, Greg might use a different word than homage, but this is before clicking the compare button, and this is after with a more neutral look in the areas that we know should be gray. Okay, the next thing I'd sort of like to do is to get a little more detail in the foliage, just so it's not quite as dark as it is. So for that, I'm going to use a contrast pin. By the way, contrast pin, that name was created by Greg.
Oh,
believe
yeah.
It? Yeah. And I do not like what it did to the A and B curves. Contrast pin is a little over enthusiastic, and it will actually add contrast pins to color areas too. And I'm going to just select that curve, click the delete key, and that'll get us back to just our neutral. Little known fact about contrast pin is when it creates those the two curve points, they're selected, so you can easily get rid of them by pressing the delete key, he said, and then it doesn't do it. Okay, come on, guy. I'm going to yank him off manually here.
You
okay.
Pull the neutral with it.
Yeah, we lost our neutral. We may as well get rid of this one, and we're going to put our neutral back in. Luckily, we don't have 5 minutes of work juggling these neutral values. Okay, so now we still have our faithful contrast pins here on the lightness curve, and I'm going to select those again. By pressing the control key and clicking on each one, we can toggle the selected state of each one. And in this case, a contrast pin is not helping us very much because see how close we are to 0 there with one end? Normally, you would like a contrast pin to be somewhere in the middle of the curve. So I'm going to get rid of the this second point here. This is not really... Okay, good. It only put 1 point in for us. So now we just need to juggle this guy up and down. We're going to see the remainder of the image go a little nuts on us when we move this curve around. So I'm going to use the pin grid command. Pin the upper right portion so it'll tend to stay put. And let's see if we can get just a little more detail into the plants. Now if we go hog wild and get tons of detail, we can at least see what detail is in there. And what we have is a lot of pure black, and we have some highlights of green. And then with the trees up above, we have a similar situation. We have a lot of black, and then some highlights of green above. And you can see some interesting color variation. The tree on the far left here, I'll just point the cursor over there, is kind of yellowish, probably in part from the sunlight hitting it, or and then these are all more or less uniform green. So let's back off on this very radical bump here, and we're going to settle for just a modest increase in detail. Okay, and pull this down a little bit. This is a technique I learned from Trond Hagstetter, who is just an amazing, he gets some amazing image results. If you can look at his work on the Curvemeister site, he does some really neat curve manipulations that I have not been able to figure out completely. But one of his secrets is to put control points, say on the quarter tones, on these, at 25% and 75%. And just move them up and down slightly and see if you like what happens. And I use that a lot. Okay, and let's try that here. And I sort of like the way we get a little pop in detail in the bricks right here. As you can see, the color worm is showing us the area. If we like those bricks, we should make that area where the worm is showing a little bit steeper. So let's try that too. I'm going to have to get rid of some of these other curve points, which I'll do by just dragging them off. Okay. Okay, a little pop in the bricks, and now we're going to work the rose window. It'd be nice to get a little more happening here, just to get any edge we can get in the contrast on the side of the building is going to be great. So let's try that. So again, we're just taking the curve points at various locations along the curve, moving them up and down, and watching to see what we get from them. Okay, I sort of like the way this pops out more. To me, this is sort of the center of interest of the image. It's where your eye is going to go first when you look at it. And I always want to be careful I don't blow any highlight detail, which in this case is an important texture area of the building here. So let's see what we can do here. Okay, you can see I'm moving the edge of the lightness curve, and as you can see, the sky starts to blow in the upper left corner there. We don't want to do that if we can avoid it. So I'm just going to back off very slightly here to try and get some more detail in this guy. So we're creating sort of a miniature S-curve just in this top fourth of the lightness curve in this area. And the idea is to get a little more contrast into this area. Okay, and the next thing I want to try is, this is just to take a look at it, but Greg and I believe Lee have come up with this wonderful technique called the parabolic or the bell curve mask. And what you do for that is generally select lightness. This is where you're worried about blowing the highlights. and in some cases about adding color to the highlights and shadows that you don't want. Pull that in as a mask, and this becomes almost an automatic reflex. Here, pull this guy up. Actually, let's do this. That's cool. Pull this guy down, and then get what's called a bell curve shape. So what this is saying is that the white area of the mask, meaning the midtones, are going to be affected extremely by what we do. The shadows and highlights not so much. Now we happen, if you'll remember, we did some important things down in the shadows here. So we're going to have to move this part of the curve up until we get, and you'll notice that the work we did in the shadows is going to start to come back for us. So, see, when we're down here, we're still quite dark down in the leaves. As we come up, we're regaining the work we did in the shadows. So, and in the case, normally, if you would see a shape like this, where your top of your curve is flattening out, you would go yuck and figure out a way not to do that. But in the case of a mask, that's all right. You can come all the way up here, and you won't introduce anything nasty. So,
Mike, would you show the mask, please, so they can understand?
Oh, yeah, let's take a look at the mask.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. If you can actually watch the mask as you make that adjustment.
Sure. Yeah, now
Okay.
if you think color white is saying to us, okay, I want you to take our curves that we did previously, and I want you to use that on the image. So that's what the white areas are telling us.
Mm-hmm.
So in the case of the church building, etc., we're going to be in pretty good shape. In the case of the wall, we're also modifying the wall reasonably well. But in the case of foliage, particularly the dark areas of the foliage, we're not going to be doing very much. So if we come up like this, we can we're lightening areas and saying, okay, I want you to please modify these lighter areas too.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. Now, and most of what we did, this is an interesting effect. If you notice in an area where we care a lot about the detail, in the rose window, we're actually seeing detail in the mask. And sometimes those can clash with one another. And that's the case where you want to blur the mask. And maybe we're running into that situation here. We'll see. So, and likewise with the white areas, if we wanted to, by the way, if these little numbers here, 0 to 214, if they get in your way, you can click on this little arrow and they'll say, okay, I'll get out of the way. Give me a break. So if we came up like this, you'll see that we would be able to also modify the lighter areas of the. And notice one thing I like about this is, remember we were lightening these little areas of the image a little too much, and maybe losing detail. As we come down, we are getting the effect I was hoping for, which is we're not going to modify them as much. So let's go back to our full image. Here's where we control which channels we look at, by the way. We can look at them all. We're looking at the mask right now. So here's our image. I'm going to do a compare. And we're getting, so this is what we had originally. It's not bad. And our new version just basically lightens the shadows up a little bit and makes the whole image a little bit warmer even than it was. Okay, so, and I think this upper part of the curve is no longer necessarily operational, so that the work we put in there may be wasted. Let's do our color bump, which I always like to see how much I can get away with. In this case, we're starting to freak out. Right about here, it's starting to look like a volcano's going off on the opposite shore here. It's a little too much, so we'll back off from that. And then do our individual moves in the two curves. I suspect we don't want to do much more here because we're going to start to get that a little too much red color going. I would love to do some more green though, and the reason being, if we can't do more contrast in the foliage, let's see if we can get some more color in the foliage. That's often an option that you have when you can't add more contrast. You can still add more color and make it show out more. So let's see what we can do here. So we're getting away with an extremely sharp bend, and we can even make those. Now, see that little how it's turning magenta there? That's caused by the really tiny bump in the magenta curve. You can see it start to bend. But I'm really liking those leaves. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but
I need some more yellow.
Okay, yeah, yellow we can in the leaves. You mean? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see if we can manage that. I'm going to take this, and right here what I'm doing is I'm watching the upper right section of the curve until it starts to bend, and then I'm just backing off from that. Because I suspect, let's go into the B channel and see what happens. We're going to increase the overall slope. Kind of a neat effect, like we're shining a yellow light on everything. But I'm not really nuts about it. You need to have some neutral and cold areas in order to make the sunset look nice. So I'm just going to do a little bit on this. Now, as for yellow, let's see what we can do. This is where the leaves are. Unfortunately, you also notice the wall is about the same place. I'm watching the worm here as I move the cursor around. That little black blip there is the leaves, where their yellow is. The wall is here, and then the building is up above that, even more yellow than the foliage. So I don't think we're going to have a lot of options here as far as modifying. Let me close the mask palette, and I'm going to move this over just to get the curve a little bit larger. And in LAB, sometimes you can add a bump to the A or B curve to just increase the yellow in a very isolated area. So I'm going to see if I can do that here. So I'm going to do I was about to say a control click, but let's not do that. Yeah, let's do a control click. Pick a spot that we think right there looks, just looking at the curve, you can see the wall is down here on the color worm, and the church is up here. So we'll pick something that's kind of in the middle, do a control click, and maybe, what was that?
You have a scroll wheel, Mike?
Yeah, I do. Do you think the scroll wheel did something?
Sometimes if I bump my scroll wheel, I get that kind of effect.
Okay. Yeah, I thought I was just doing a pure control click. But what we want to do is not swing the whole curve up and down. We want to create just a little bump and see if we can get some more yellow into that specific area of the curve. In fact, this might be an interesting time to use
the highlight
curve. Is that it?
Yep.
Whee! Okay. What this is showing in the green overlay that's on top of the image, that's the part of the image that's affected by this curve point. And as you can see, it's just about the entire image. If we do 2 points on here and select them both, now we're down to something more reasonable. And I had to deselect highlight curve and select it again in order to update the areas that are affected. But when you have 2 points selected on a curve, highlight curve will show you the area whose color will be affected by those points. So let's try and create a little bump in this general area here. keeping the rest of the curve more or less where it is. And
you lost a selection.
See what we can do. Yeah. Well, I want to make a bump here as opposed to. So we're going to try and recreate the curve more or less the way it was outside of that bump. Okay, let's turn off highlight curve and see what it looks like. So as we move this little area of the inner part of the curve, I don't know if you can see it, but we are getting a little more yellow in there in the foliage. Okay, well that's let's do a compare, and it's a little more evident here because we have the increase in brightness and slightly more yellow in the foliage.
Yeah, it doesn't look as neon green.
Yeah, it's foliage actually contains a lot of yellow, and you need to make sure it's that's present, or it's going to start to look pretty awful. Okay. I'm going to back off very slightly here. And the reason I'm doing that is just to get the facade of the church just a little less brilliantly yellowed than it is. And let's play with blue too as long as we're here. Okay. Now this, what happened here? It's always a good idea to take a look before you cash out to see if anything funny has happened to any of your curves. In this case, we lost some of our hard-earned shadow detail. Let's see. So it's always a good idea before you go ahead and hit apply to go back and make sure you haven't introduced anything into the other curves. And in my case, the control click that I did on the, I forget what it was now, on the foliage, to try to add some more yellow, added another curve down here, curve point down here. So I need to get rid of that and make sure we're in good shape here. Okay, so, and I'm going to check also the A curve and see what happened there. We're good shape there. This is where we added the green in the foliage. This is the bump we added to add a little bit of yellow back into the foliage so that it's not so sort of pure emerald green looking. Okay, one thing I do, and it's a habit I've gotten into, is I want the curve to look nice and not have, like if I see something like that, and the curve guard is changing the curve to be red, I really don't want to leave the image with anything looking like that. You know, just picture the Dan Margulis frowning down on your curve here. So yeah, we should put that
quite
picture.
The thought bubble.
Put a little picture of Dan up here, and it frowns when you're
frowning.
Yeah, I wonder if Dan would do that for us. That would be fun.
So Mike, excuse me. When does that curve turn red, and why?
Well, it turns red when you get a negative slope on your curve. So as soon as any part of the curve is angling downward, it says, "Hey, wait a minute. You probably don't want this curve." You know, I'm just a piece of software here, but I'm thinking you don't want to do that. So if you see it turn red while you're adjusting, you want to back off and make sure you don't do that.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah, you can actually, and here, this is the geek in me, I can't help it, but there is a, let's see, curve guard. You can turn it off if you want. You can say, look, I'll do my curves the way I want. I don't want you turning red on me, okay? And you can also set a minimum and maximum slope. So if you want it to warn you when the slope is below, say, 1% or 5%, you could set a 0.01 or a 0.05 in there. So actually, I'm sorry, a 1 or a 5. These slopes are in percent. So anyway, that's a little feature. And curve guard is used, for example, if you are in RGB mode and you set too many neutrals, um, then it will set your neutrals up in the order that you clicked on them. But if any of those neutrals cause the curve guard to kick in, that neutral will get a red bar through it, and it'll refuse to honor that neutral. So if you start seeing neutrals not working, that's because curve guard is vetoing them. In fact, that's exactly the term I use in the code. Now, one thing that I think would be cool is if we could get these reddish areas a little bit darker. That would be great. And there's two ways to approach that. One is we could use the mask to darken selectively. But I like what LAB's doing for us here. So I'm going to click Apply, go back into Photoshop, and we're going to come back in and do an RGB correction to darken those reddish areas. That was cool. So let's come back in and go into RGB, and if we just take the dark edges of the red, which actually is not all that dark, I'm going to try and just get those windows a little better. Okay, now looking just at the windows, okay, ignoring the horrible things we're doing to the rest of the image. That's more the look I would like for the windows. And let's see if we can find now a mask that will help us out with the windows, but not affect the rest of the image. And this comes very close. Although it's called a skin tone mask, in this case, it might be what we're after. So let's click on Skin. Go in and look directly at the mask here. Okay, right there. And let's adjust that mask so that it tends to focus even more just on on Notre Dame. Okay. Okay, I'm going to use that bell curve shape because I like it so much. Okay, no, I'm not. Let's just use the good old move the 0 point to the right. And I'm still looking for a case, by the way, where I can show you what blurring the mask does. And this might be it. I don't know. Let's find out. Okay, so we're confining ourselves using the skin tone mask, of all things, to affecting mainly the area of the church and a little bit of the stone wall at the bottom. Okay, now let's go back and click on all up here in the channels. These are both the same, by the way, these two controls. And let's see what that did for us. That's kind of interesting. I like what it does to the church. I'm a little suspicious of what it did to these trees here. Notice they were lit with orange light before, and now they look green. Well, trees should be green, right?
Yeah, but stone shouldn't.
Yeah, it's not quite. You're right. Some of the stone is turning green. So I think we're doing a little too much with our red curve here. So,
can you do it all on the master channel instead?
That's a good idea. Instead of going selectively for red, let's just darken those areas. That's a good idea. Okay, first we'll see where we are. We're all over the map here because we have both dark areas. But let's see what happens. Okay, notice as we darken here, the church is getting darker, but not the green plants that we worked so hard for before. That's the mask working for us. So, okay, I sort of like the increase in contrast I'm getting. in the church, so we're going to keep a little bit of that. But I think the red in the shadows is just a little too much. So we're going to just pull a little of that out, but not so much that we start to turn. If we came all the way, things start to go crazy green here. But if we take just about 25% of that or so. Okay. And I'll do compare. Here's what we accomplished in RGB. We basically darkened these reddish areas and got a little more contrast in the church. And I don't know, I think that improves the image, but you may decide differently when you try this out. Okay, let's hit apply. And boy, that took a long time on that one image. And we can go in the history palette and take a look at the original image, which is still not that bad. It's still a good looking image. After our first pass in LAB, here's what we had. It was good except for perhaps the reddishness in the dark areas on the front. And then in RGB we made those darker without sacrificing too much of our detail. Now something I don't like now I'm noticing in the RGB is look at what's happening on our wall here. We're getting some really weird green splotching.
Hey Mike, can you step back to the second one? Can you go forward from there?
Sure.
Let's go forward from there. I have an idea.
All right.
Let's go into CMYK.
Excellent. Okay.
And see if you can do that with a K channel adjustment. Then you're not going to change the color significantly.
Okay, I like it. Let's do a channel survey here and see what we have. Here's cyan. And okay, K channel is not going to do very much here, but let's try doing a heavier black here. Okay, so now we have something up here we can play with.
I think if you mask it like you had before, and then use the K channel instead.
Okay, skin tone mask, and we're going to move our mask up to, where did we have it? Pretty extreme, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you put a little bend in it too.
There's the mask.
Yeah, now go after the K channel.
Okay, here we go. There's our K channel. Turn the entire image on and let's play with, we call it black here instead of K. That's interesting. Okay, let's see what we can do with the K channel. Now notice in this mode we have black on the right and white on the left. That's kind of the normal way to do CMYK. And okay.
There you go.
I like that.
That's better. And you don't mess the color up.
Yeah, no, this is great. Thank you. Now, if Lee were here, he would say, try HSB. Okay, so as you can see, we have a number of options, but you need to, the pattern here is if you're trying to change shadow detail in an area and you're having trouble with the colors changing in the rest of the image, then go in and try the K channel because it will leave your colors alone. It's not going to mess with them. It will deal only with shadows. So if you can turn your problem into a problem of adjusting shadows, then you'll get some good vibes in CMYK mode. Okay. I'm not getting a lot happening where I want it to right here, but that's nice. Okay, so I'm not as used to working with black on the right, so I tend, when I want to change the bright areas, I move to the right automatically. But it's just the opposite here. So
and that's because That's because in CMYK you're actually applying ink to paper rather than dealing with transmittal or print to paper.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, if you want, you can click this diamond up here, and you'll have white on the right. But in deference to the man, I keep black on the right for CMYK always. I don't care if it's harder to do; it's better. So. Okay.
I think my tongue will be bleeding by the end of this session, Mike.
I have to admire Greg's self-control here. Okay, so anyway, that gives you an idea of what happens with the mask. I am. Let's try. Okay, nothing. I'm still looking for an example where blurring the mask makes things look nicer. So there's our Notre Dame. Let's do an apply of this one. And okay, so this is our. It's a subtle difference. Okay, anyway, that showed you some of the ideas of how CMYK is used. So, okay, let's try. You know, if I were working on this a little bit more, I might try to deepen that blue sky. But I think we are done with Notre Dame for now, and I'll leave that as an exercise for everyone else to see if you can make that blue sky, if not darker, at least bring out a little more detail in it.
Is that image available out there? And Lowell, do you mind if we use it?
No, have at it. All the ones I sent you, I'd appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay, good.
If you want to use them.
Yeah, this will be in the on curvemeister.com/forum. Look for the session for today's date, which is October 28th, 2011, and we'll have these images available for download.
Great.
So, okay, we're just about reaching the end of our hour here.
It goes so fast.
Yeah, and you know, in the time that I did one image, Greg, less time than I did one image, Greg ran through 3 or 4. So I'm going to try and work on my pacing a little bit and go a little faster. Is anyone interested in playing with the thing we did last week again, the panoramas, the blend modes?
The face?
Yeah, although this won't be the face. This will be a more the auto blend layers is the official name of this. And I was playing with that earlier this week. And let's try just a nice square image here. Would you like to see what I did with it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. First thing I did is I created a bunch of layers. Let's do just 4 in this case. Just to play with how this command works, because I was wondering, what is it doing? You know, it does this magic where the faces blend with each other, right? And I'm going to get rid of this bottom layer so that we have, wherever we're transparent, and the concept of transparency is very important to this guy. Where it's transparent, there's no pixel information, and where it's where we have color, we of course have color. So let's put down some spots of green here. Okay, there's a green spot, and I'm going to turn on color swatches here so we can switch around. There's a red one on a different layer, a blue one on another layer, and a magenta one here. And just for good measure, let's do a little bit of white here and some black here. Okay, now if we select all these layers and run auto blend layers, you'll notice the layers will shrink slightly, but they'll get hard edges on them, but nothing really changed. So I'll do Control Z to show you here's before, here's after. So in this case, the only thing that the auto blend is doing is setting a hard transparency layer, all or nothing, on all the images. And that's part of the job of this this function is to decide which layer contributes to which pixel unambiguously. But the other, okay, now let's try some of the blending action. We'll go to select layer 3, and I'll select blue again, and we're going to bridge over to some of the other colors. So suppose this guy now touches the black layer, and for good measure, let's have him go over and touch just the magenta layer. Now when we select everybody and run it, you'll see what happens with the auto blend layers. And what's happened is the colors for layers that overlap with each other have been merged with each other. So now they're all, this isn't exactly a pure blue, this is a mixture of blue, black, and magenta. So, and if we look at so the important thing is the layers have to overlap with each other. If they overlap, even by a couple pixels, then their colors sort of run into each other like watercolors and mathematically blend with each other.
So which one controls it?
They all kind of vote.
Because when you did the portraiture, the color from the Tom Cruise image took over the color from the Brad Pitt image.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Let's take a large, let's delete these guys, and I think it may do an area average thing. So let's take our blob of green and make it larger and see what happens. Come on, dude. There we go.
Your mask is
Oh, the masks are screwing me up. Yes. Okay. Let's just delete the layers and start fresh here. Okay, so let's take a big blob of blue. What I want to do is take a big chunk of blue like this and blend it with a small chunk of some other color. Okay, create a new layer, and we'll put a little tiny thing of red here. So these two guys are going to fight.
Do they have to be touching? Do you have to blend one over? Okay.
Yeah, we do. So what we'll do is we'll have blue reach out to red. Say, hello, red. It's like Amoeba Wars here. Okay, so we have a big blob of blue, small blob of red. Select them both. And by the way, for people watching the recording, if you can't get this feature to work with faces, then I highly advise you play around with, create a couple transparent layers, put blobs of paint on them, get that to work. Okay, here's auto blend. And as you can see, blue dominated. If we make red somewhat larger, I don't know, are you guys enjoying this?
Swap layers, Mike. Swap the layers.
Swap them? You mean the colors?
No, I'm thinking if layer 4 is below layer 3.
Okay, let's try that.
Now run it.
Okay, here we go. Auto blend.
No, there's something else going on.
So they're both, I think it takes the areas. And in the case of the images, the Tom Cruise portion of the image had a lot more area than the mask area of the image did. And I think that's why it tended towards to select his colors. Okay, let's take this. I'm going to make red larger, and we'll see if we get an intermediate purple color, then we'll know that it's at least is related to the amount of color. Oh darn! Come on. I always forget this. Auto blend layers.
There
Okay.
you go.
So yeah, so I submit it's the area of color. and then any amount of overlap is going to be sufficient to cause the colors to sort of run together. If you picture watercolors, it's a similar kind of effect. So anyway, I just wanted to touch on that from last week. Okay. Well, I think we're at the end of the hour here. Thank you for coming. And
all right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Greg?
No, I think we've covered a lot of ground today, and I appreciate you being willing to come out here and do this again, Mike. And I hope the people who download and watch the video are willing to post their questions out to the forum. The intent of these videos is to spur discussion and to get people to start talking about what they're doing with Curvemeister and Photoshop.
Excellent. Well, it's been fun, and we'll probably do one of these next week, although you'll be in California next week, right?
Yeah, I'll be in transit.
Great.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you again, everybody, for coming out, and we'll see everybody on the forum.
Well, thank you both very much.
Okay, thanks, Lowell.
Appreciate it.